Welcome to the People Planet Profit podcast. I'm Hayley Jarick, CEO of the Supply Chain Sustainability School, and today I'm joined by Abigail Heywood. Abigail is the National Sustainability Manager at Lendlease, and I've asked her to join me today because we're going to talk all things about decarbonising the construction industry. So welcome, Abby.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Okay, so like I said, I'm going to jump straight in. I'm going to interrogate you from the start because I think that this is a conversation that we've probably spoken about with each other a number of different times. And construction's always been flagged as one of those really hard to decarbonise industries. I'm going to ask you, because you're in it and you breathe it, like what's been done around the plans for how do we decarbonise the construction industry?
Oh, it's a great question, and one that we asked ourselves. In 2020, we committed to our Mission Zero, which was two targets around becoming net zero carbon by 2025 for Scope 1 and 2 emissions, and absolute zero by 2040. So when we break this down, we're like, well, how do we do this for construction? How do we decarbonise our industry? So we actually reached out to the University of Queensland to get their help on how we actually get off of fossil fuels in our, think of the big yellow machines. So we reached out to them last year, and they actually determined that our emissions are actually really significant. So our industry accounts for 23% of global carbon emissions, and 5.5% of those relate directly to the burning of liquid fuels. So for us at Lendlease, that's mainly renewable diesel. So UQ did this massive process where they looked at all the technologies, they looked at all the energy sources around how do we get low carbon and zero emission construction machinery. And they were really thorough with that. So we looked at hydrogen, electricity, we looked at energy storage, we looked at biofuels. So with that, like biodiesel, renewable diesel, they looked at all the different types of options for decarbonising our industry. And then we worked with them to actually translate that into how do we take all the research and operationalize that into our actual construction activity. And the main takeaway that we learn is that we're actually a hard to abate sector. So people often think of hard to abate sectors as aviation and things like that. And so this research was really key in identifying that construction is as well. So we don't have the technological solutions readily available right now to decarbonise. So our research confirmed that the most promising decarbonisation options are to electrify and use what's called renewable diesel. So that means using electric construction machinery where there are options available, and using renewable diesel to substitute mineral diesel where electric options are not available. So I guess it's probably everyone's going to go, well, what's renewable diesel? It's probably worth explaining.
I was going to ask the same question. Okay, you've thrown a lot of jargon at us there, and everyone's sort of decoding all of that, going, I don't know, that feels like greenwashing to me, like renewable diesel. Let's throw a word in front of it, and then we've got biodiesel. It all sounds very confusing. Can you break it down for us? Is diesel? Like, are there different types of diesel?
So in terms of it comes under the umbrella of biofuels. That's the big umbrella term. So biodiesel is available in Australia. We've got 3 refineries on the east coast, and it's actually made from vegetable oils and animal fats, and that is made through a process, sorry to throw more jargon, transesterifications. It's a real simple process of converting those fats and oils into a fuel that is, you can use in a diesel engine. So we can use that in our equipment right now. You can use it at 5% in any machinery. That's been mandated in Europe for many, many years, and we use all the same construction machinery globally. And you can even use up to 20% biodiesel in most most engines, diesel engines. So then when you get to renewable diesel, it's like an advanced biofuel. It's like a second or third generation fuel. So it's made from a different chemical process of hydro-treating. And it's different in that it's actually chemically identical to mineral diesel. So you don't need to blend it with mineral diesel like you often do with biodiesel. So you can use it as 100%. You don't have to modify your engines, and it performs just the same. So it's this real kind of miracle fuel, really. It's quite incredible. And for us, when you're looking at decarbonising the industry, if we can use electrification to electrify everything we can, a lot of our bigger machinery actually isn't available right now. So what that means is we need renewable diesel to be a real key transition fuel while we wait for those larger pieces of machinery to become electrified, which could be, 2040. It could be, the research showed that that's actually quite a long way off. So renewable diesel is really critical, but unfortunately, it's not actually available in Australia right now.
I think that's kind of a key point then, isn't it? So we're talking about if we want to, so if I was to try and summarize what you've just said, is construction's really hard. The big things we need to do is cut out our fossil fuels from the construction industry as best we can. The key way to do that is to electrify things, but that technology is not available yet. So in order to transition our current machinery into electric, we need to look at the diesel consumption that we've got and see what's available and see how we can transition through. At the moment, we can go biodiesel 20% in the Australian market, 3 refineries on the East Coast. Renewable diesel is the next step as a good transition, but that's not currently available in Australia. So we've kind of got this whole industry where we've identified the big ticket items and we're moving through. But are there any other barriers for not being able to use fossil-free fuel? Like eliminating all of those fossil fuels from the construction sector. That's going to catch me up through this whole thing,
I know. Absolutely. Yeah, that's that exactly summarizes it. So while we wait for our machinery to the larger pieces to become electric, the main barriers, and this is why we don't have renewable diesel available in Australia right now, is because we've had a lack of policy. We've just had this vacuum of low carbon fuel policy, liquid fuel policies. So when you look around the world, California, literally more states by the day in the US, Europe, they all have they all have liquid fuel carbon policies. So that has provided a big market signal to refineries and industries to make those fuels. And we haven't had that here in Australia. So that has led to us not having refining available at the moment. So you can import, and we have done that, but that's extremely expensive to do so. So you can't really operationalize and substitute all your mineral diesel with imported renewable diesel right now, because there's no policy or financial support to level the playing field with mineral diesel, which, at the moment is subsidized heavily along various stages of its production. So as an example, in the UK, we have already gone 100% fossil fuel free construction. So we don't use mineral diesel in any of our construction machinery. We've been able to just drop it in, and there's been no issues with, the productivity of our construction sites. Our machinery is all working just as well. And so what we end up as another barrier here in Australia is, because we don't have this fuel, we actually don't have the construction industry understanding around it. So there's a lot of fear around biofuels. They think it's going to, blow up engines. So we need to work with industry really to give that assurance that renewable diesel is a fuel that isn't going to invalidate warranties, nothing's going to break down, it's not going to impact your productivity. And the same with biodiesel. If you use that in the percents that, so for instance 20%, if your original equipment manufacturer wants that, then there won't be any issues to your machinery. There's no greater risk than using mineral diesel. And then lastly, we need to work on our grid capacity, because if we electrified everything right now, we wouldn't be able to plug it in. So we need to work with, or the government has plans around increasing grid capacity, and we're actually finding that batteries are providing a really good buffer where there is that lack of capacity in the grid. Batteries are working really well as bridging that in the interim.
Another issue as well is we're transforming the structure of how we're fueling things. So there's a whole lot of infrastructure that currently exists around mineral diesel. And when you come
Yes.
out with things like saying we should stop using that, I can imagine there's a lot of people panicking, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people panicking that rely on diesel at the moment, thinking, what do you mean you're going to turn off diesel? What do you mean it's going to be more expensive? Without and it could scare a lot of people, not only in
Yes.
construction, but in agriculture and other industries that rely on diesel.
Yeah.
You know, uh, thinking just the trucking industries in general, like transport and logistics industries. So it's kind of like everybody needs to move together. And then
That's
similarly,
right.
like you said, with it's like electrifying cars, right? We have to get those portals in place that you can recharge your vehicle no matter where you drive it. And then similarly, that infrastructure needs to then build around construction and have that available. Like you said, at the quantities, we're not talking, plugging your toaster level of connectivity to the grid here. I suppose that's
Yeah,
then getting harder for people to understand that you go, okay, you plug it into the grid, and then it's going to be as green as however green the grid electricity is. So we need to
correct.
try and then ensure that we've got renewable energy in that grid,
That's right.
and like you said, and then saving it as well. So it's not something we can literally flick a switch on. Sorry, pardon the pun. Um,
Yeah, but there's so much opportunity though. So when I think about so electrifying, like we can get to zero emission, like you say, if we can get when we get the grid to renewable energy, we're zero emission. So renewable diesel is that transition fuel along the way. And you very much touched on it there. The opportunity of renewable diesel and into getting it something that's available in Australia, it actually decarbonises a huge range of other sectors. So when you talk about transport, we don't have hydrogen trucks right now. If we have hydrogen as an energy source, getting green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen rather, it is very, very difficult and expensive as well. So the timeline and the expense of other technologies in other sectors is not there. So renewable diesel provides that transition fuel for a lot of other sectors. So marine transport, these agriculture, as you've said. So we can all decarbonize together. And if you think bigger picture, at the moment our fuel comes into the country and then it's distributed around. What a domestic renewable diesel industry would look like is we would have feedstock. So this would be the plants and the plants or the vegetable oils and all those sorts of biological based feedstocks that would be used in the technology to make it. That can all be grown here in Australia. We don't have to compete with food crops. We can do it in a sustainable way where a part of the plant goes to the food industry, the rest of the plant is the waste from the plants can be used for the refining. We can grow native crops that provide oils or provide the woody material that can go into the renewable diesel technology. So you actually start to see that you can have a whole industry, a rural industry that can be created around the feedstocks that make these fuels. And then it's more expensive to have all these feedstocks and truck them around the country. So what then starts to happen is you get local refining. So you have smaller but more frequent refineries around the country. And then the fuel that comes out of those refinery is then trucked around and there would be a whole, so you end up with this whole network of grid of fuel across the whole country that's made from local feedstock. So you've got a huge injection into regional economies, regional growth, and then you've got all the employment. And then with that, you get the fuel security. So Australia can control our fuel. It makes us a lot more independent. And then the other benefits, around decarbonising. So we get air quality benefits, and so it's win-win-win. When you actually look at getting this industry off the ground. It's a product we need. We don't have to change our engines to do it, and we can get all these other benefits as well. So it actually really excites me, the opportunity here.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you said, like, why not, really?
Yeah.
Because you've got there's so many wins in there, and I think, it's a few people would probably, like you said, there's a lot of scare tactics going on out there about what you lose, and I suppose people who are currently invested in that structure of import, add on your costs on sell, and then massive amounts of shipping and logistics around the country to try and ship it around. If that's your industry, then you'll need to pivot as this happens, because there's going to be more localized, centralized. I mean, they're still going to need trucking. You're still going to have to take it from the refinery to everywhere. Right. That's still going to exist. It's just going to look a little bit different. If you currently are importing fuels and then redistributing them, well, your market's going to be changing, because we won't be importing those fuels. They'll be created locally, and then being able to ship them around. So it's not as, I think there's some balancing that's going to happen. People are going to be pivoting in this space, and not to mention all of the other changes with electrification that comes into play. There's going to be recycling of those different battery technologies and maintenance of all of those new systems. But I suppose what worries me in this space is the opportunity cost that would happen if we don't do this.
Yes.
So we're starting to see this in other industries as well, where Europe sort of ups the ante, and America ups the ante in some areas. And then Australia gets left with the dregs of the industry who don't want to move. So if you've got people around the world that, if other countries have these policies in place, they have these market standards where you can't even sell a diesel truck in there because no one's asking for them, they're all asking for electric, then what will happen is Australia is going to get dumped with all of these excess stock that they can't offload anywhere else in the world. And then we'll get stuck with all of this infrastructure of these cheap, trucks and things floating around that nobody else wants. But then it'll delay our transition even further. So, we're going to be setback if we don't.
That's right.
Move on this quickly.
Absolutely, and there's another factor as well. There is that these feedstocks that we can grow. The feedstocks that we can make renewable diesel. So, for example, use cooking oil. Already, huge, massive millions of litres are already exported out of this country into those other regions to get made into renewable diesel. So that opportunity loss is already happening. So we're already losing feedstocks because other countries who have policy, we don't have policy here. So they're seeing us as a bit of a feedstock cash cow. So they take our used cooking oil and make it into renewable diesel. So as you say, if we do nothing, when, what will end up happening is we won't have our own industries, and we'll have to buy back this renewable diesel to transition from other countries and import it. So we'll end up paying more for it, and it will be made from our feedstocks. So it's just, you just end up with these crazy situations.
Yeah. So then let's spin it around and focus on some good news stories. So Lendlease.
Yes. So we're
doing already in this space. Yeah. What have you done already?
Well, UK business has already gone to 100% fossil fuel free for over a year now. So that I'm very envious of that. So they introduced a policy to do that. So our One Sydney Harbour project, one of our residential buildings there, we've given it a go to go fossil fuel free. So we have looked at our high diesel using activities and substituted them for electric options. So all the small things that run around, all the elevated work platforms, cranes, the small cranes, all that, they're all electric. We have electrified our big tower cranes, our hoists, all of the big machinery. And then what's been really exciting is we had a big diesel concrete pump. So we're going to be pumping up to 35 stories. We've actually been able to substitute that with an electric concrete pump, and we think that's the largest in Australia. It was our subcontractor, Azuri, worked with us, and they procured that specifically. And we're already finding that we're getting efficiencies around the energy use. It's cheap. We're thinking already, we're just doing the analytics right now, but initially we think that we're using less energy compared to an internal combustion engine because the diesel use a lot of heat, and it's a lot quieter already. So we're already getting those gains. So that's been really exciting. On our Parramatta Powerhouse, we do have 3 diesel cranes. So we imported Australia's first batch of renewable diesel to fuel those cranes. So that's been excited. They're all running right now on renewable diesel, and they'll be expected to have used about 90,000 litres by the time we get to the end of the project. So they're still going to be running for another while. So that's been exciting, and that was an Australian first. And we actually met a lot of the barriers doing that. So that meant we had to in partnership with refueling solutions and MAR contracting, we had to navigate the whole fuel standards process because renewable diesel doesn't currently meet Australians' regulations around fuel in this country. So we had to get an exemption to do that. So that meant that we came face to face with those barriers, but we got over them and we got that Australia first, which was really exciting. So the fuel on that project will it's an HVO, they call it, so a hydro vegetable treating oil type of renewable diesel that's come from the Netherlands, and that gives up to 90% saving on its carbon emissions over its life cycle compared to mineral diesel. So a massive saving there. And then on our Queensland Performing Arts project, we have a mobile crane there, a 230 tonner, and we have used renewable diesel in that crane. We've imported that especially, so that's been exciting. And we have a number of cranes on that project, and we've got 2 electric cranes already plugged into the grid, and then there wasn't enough capacity for us to plug a third one in. So we have a tower crane that's actually running off a big battery. So it's like a small shipping container, and we plug that into the grid where we have a small amount available. So it trickle charges that battery 24 hours a day. And then when the crane works, it gives these big peaks. That's generally how cranes work. As they lift, there's a big sort of peak of energy, and then it levels again, and that battery is buffering that. So it's basically taking all that peaks and powering that crane. So that's been really successful, and we've estimated that saved 46,000 litres of diesel by having that battery to substitute what would have been a generator powering that crane. So there are main ones that we're using the principles of this research and then rolling out these targeted initiatives for high diesel using activities. It's been really exciting. We're learning a lot.
I was going to say, you just rolled it off the tongue. Like you go, yeah, it was difficult, but we sorted it out. Like, it's like, I'm sure that there was a lot more to it than just, there's a standard. Can we please get an exemption? Oh, okay, then,
Yeah, and
but
you're absolutely right. It has been really challenging. That's a really good point. So the way we've actually navigated this is you're right. I just say these initiatives, but they've all been done in partnership with the supply chain. So, the cranes have been, done, with MAR contracting, refueling solutions who have imported the fuel for us. And we've all worked together, and also the client, Infrastructure New South Wales, on that project. So we all work together to literally take a hurdle at a time, and we've just worked our way through. And so all of these initiatives, same with the concrete pump, we needed to make sure there was enough grid capacity. We had to borrow electricity from a different part of our Barangaroo development there. So that was for, and there was a cost of upgrading that. So it's all been each hurdle. We've just worked together. No one of us could have done it on our own. So we've done it very much in partnership with our supply chain and just taken a hurdle at a time so that we've then ended up with that outcome.
I think it's sort of a really good lesson for everybody that if you set a goal and you set a target and you work with the people that are willing to work with you to achieve that target, then you can achieve these things. You can
Absolutely
just tackle them one obstacle at a time. You can jump over those hurdles and push your project forward, still meeting all those requirements. Because I think that's kind of, you sit back and you go, okay, great, but you wouldn't be pushing this if you didn't have that beacon of light you're heading towards with a good targeted goal. If you didn't work with clients that were willing to help you and push with you along the way to sort of push it even further. And like you said, then working with all of your supply chain. So I'm assuming when you say like the supply chain, it's not just your suppliers, but also your subbies on site, right? Like you're
absolutely
working with a lot of that extended in carbon, we talk about the Scope 3 network of people that are coming in and playing around and helping to do all of this sort of thing. So I suppose my next question is then, if you're the one pushing the goals and you're the one pushing clients and you're the one working with suppliers and subbies, well, what can they do to help you? So if all the people out there listening to this are going, this is amazing, I want to work with Lendlease on doing this stuff and I want to be part of this, I want in 30 years' time to be sitting back and telling my kids and grandkids that I was part of this massive change in the construction industry in Australia. That's the reason why they can, still go to the beach and it's not like, more inland than it used to be, or the air's breathable. These are sorts of things that you want to be able to sit down. It's a legacy you want to have. So people out there sort of contemplating their legacy, and they want to supply to you, or they want to be one of your subbies, what can they do to help you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, look at what you've got. Look at the machinery that you have and make that selection. So offer us the electric version. Use the electric version where the technology is available right now. So that is often the smaller pieces of machinery, but where you have electric, EWPs or any of the small things, use them. And then if you're replacing machinery as it gets to the end of its life, buy the electric version as the next version. Excavators are up to about 7 ton now in terms of their capability. Consider buying the electric version if you're buying a small excavator. Rather than going back to the diesel, use the electric. We know over the life of its operating life, they are cheaper to run and maintain. A total cost of ownership, as they call it, is cheaper for electric machinery compared to diesel. So that's all in our research. And then at the moment, if you've got a diesel machinery, use biodiesel. You can get that right now. You can use 5% in any machine. All our equipment's warranted for that, because as I said earlier, that's been the case in Europe for many years. And see if you can use 20.
And also, just to point out to everybody as well, let's talk about the Australian standard for diesel actually includes 5%, and they don't even have to tell you. So quite literally, everybody in this country could be going to the Bowser, pulling out diesel and putting it in their car and be getting 5% B5 without even really knowing that they could be putting in there, because the Australian standard says that's great. 5% is normal diesel by standard, right?
Absolutely. Yes, you're absolutely right. And that is, I think you even referred to it once that made me laugh. Like that is such low-hanging fruit that it's already on the floor. Like it's fallen off the tree. B5 is just the absolute easiest thing we can do. Use 20% where your original equipment manufacturers allow it. We can do that right now. And then we're expecting renewable diesel to come online in the next few years. So there's a refinery in WA and also up in Queensland. So one's in Gladstone, one's in WA. And they're going through the planning permission right now. They're going early, so they're doing it in absence of policy. So they're going hard. They're doing it a bit tougher with the financial investments, but they are both on track to start producing renewable diesel in 2026. So gear up for it. Think about your machinery between now and then. If you can't get an electric option, make sure any machinery you buy can use renewable diesel. The majority of them can. Caterpillar, Komatsu, Liebherr, they're all making their new machines renewable diesel compatible. If you buy a Volvo truck right now, it comes off the forecourt with a tank full of renewable diesel. So the technology is there. So when you're looking forward in the next few years, get ready to start using renewable diesel when it comes online, because that's our transition. We're doing all this work right now, and we're putting it in cranes, we're putting it in machinery, so that when it comes online, we don't have to demonstrate it. We already know it's perfectly fine, so that we can just hit the road running as soon as that domestic supply comes on board. So I would just ask that subbies, get on board, do it with us, get ready to use it as soon as it's available.
Wow. So it should be very inspiring for everybody out there. So all of the suppliers and subbies, get on board with it. Lendlease is pushing forward and really leading the pack in this, and jump on the bandwagon, right? Just making those transition, testing it out and putting your money where your mouth is, by not asking other people to do things, but by doing it in your own machinery, and really sort of putting it on there to show people that it doesn't make it turn into rainbows, fairylands types equipment that's not going to explode. This stuff is doable. These are really practical things that we can do that make massive outcomes. And like you said, if we can even just if we electrify where we can, and then use renewable diesel where we can't, and biodiesel as a transition. It's such an easy transition that we can all get there. And hopefully more construction companies out there adopt fossil fuel free targets, and sort of going beyond that scope 1 and 2 and scope 3 and getting everybody on board as well. I'm loving the journey of going and having those conversations with all of those subbies and of yours that come on board and do training with us. So I think it's really interesting. And I really like the idea of, it's the classic pushback, right? Of I don't like change. It's not even, I don't even want to. It's just that, it's different than what I'm used to, and I feel uncomfortable and nervous about doing this. And then once you get sort of over all of those social hurdles that people go through, they grieve the loss of familiarity, and get on board with it. It just, a couple of weeks later, all of a sudden, that's the new normal, right?
That's right.
You'll find that people then start bidding on jobs that don't require that, and that'll be the unusual one, right? Like you're not using that? Oh, that's weird. Everyone should be getting on board with this because it makes such a, like you said, it's win-win-win, right? Like
that's
creating local industries. We're not exporting all of our resources overseas and then buying them back at higher rates. This is around keeping things local, developing regional jobs, developing our regional industry. It goes beyond construction into other industries. Lots and lots of wins in this space. So I can't wait to chat with you again in sort of a few years' time and get the update on where things are at. Because I think even from when we started speaking to each other to now, so much has changed.
It's been we released this research in May last year, and it's been quite a year. It's probably been it's been so exciting though, to be on the forefront of it. It's been and figuring it out. I'm not sure if you feel the same, but I've worked in sustainability for quite a few years, and we've spent so much of our careers trying to get people to understand why we need change, and we've gone past that now, and now we're in the how, and it's the most exciting bit now that we can just get on with. So how do we do this? How do we make these solutions? And so that's I would say the most exciting year of my career, really nutting out the how we actually do it. And we've deliberately made this information open source, available. Check out our Mission Zero progress report that's on our website, because we want to share these stories. This isn't about a competitive advantage. It's about everyone changing together. So we want to share this information so that we can all move quicker.
Abby, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's been great. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for listening to the People Planet Profit podcast. Until our next episode. Bye.